According to recent data, the number of climate cases has more than doubled across an expanding number of jurisdictions over the past several years, as more people challenge governments and corporations for not doing enough to combat environmental issues. But as the lawsuits mount, so do the questions about whether the legal actions actually make a difference. Joining us now to discuss is Law Professor at Florida International University and Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Mario Loyola. Mario, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get right into it. There's been a recent wave of climate-related court cases that could have broad implications for legal systems around the whole world, really, most notably in Switzerland, where the Senior Women for Climate Protection went to court. First off, can you just tell us about this landmark case?
Well, these cases in general are trying to advance a theory of rights-based environmentalism in which, under various theories, they're trying to make people liable for contributing to the carbon emissions that are supposed to be warming the planet and so forth. But it's a really bad idea because climate policy, like all environmental protection policies, involves trade-offs that hopefully in a democracy have to be made through the democratic process.
Can you just tell us about what the outcome of this case was?
In this particular case in Switzerland, they found that some people had been contributed to carbon emissions that had warmed the planet. But again, tracing liability to where it actually starts is very difficult.
Talk to us about how symbolic this was. Do you think it's actually going to make a difference in the end?
I don't think that it will. These climate policies and the transition to a net zero economy, to a low carbon emissions electricity grid is an extraordinarily complicated set of policy issues that, again, can only be done through the democratic process. Even trying to address it through regulatory means, as has been done in the United States, by which agencies step in where, let's say, Congress has failed to enact a carbon tax scheme, a carbon trading scheme. Even doing it through regulatory agencies involves problems because you're cutting the public out of making those trade-offs. The problems of cutting the public out of those trade-offs is even worse if you're doing it through the courts. Kinds of rights-based lawsuits, even if they produce victories, but at the end of the day, you may result in some people getting hit with liability that their amounts that they owe that they have to pay over. But none of this none of this is going to affect the actual climate and the problem, because those are planetary. The climate issue affects the entire planet and can only be addressed by a successful clean energy transition. And successful clean energy transition requires energy abundance. If climate policies produce energy scarcity, if, say, you're starting to reduce the supply of fossil fuels before renewable substitutes are ready in sufficient quantities to make up the slack, all you're going to do is produce an energy scarcity crisis because people can't be without energy. And so they're willing to pay, they're willing to forego other things that they need in order to pay more for energy. And so all you're going to do in the end is create a political backlash against climate action.
So if that's the case, then what else can be done if we have this renewable energy scarcity, but people are still concerned about global warming? What can be done?
So the pursuit of renewable substitutes is great as long as it's done through market-based mechanisms that allow people to switch to renewable substitutes when they are actually cost competitive. So subsidies are bad because subsidies make it impossible for nuclear, the big plants on which electricity relies, like nuclear and natural gas plants, can't recoup their costs when solar is getting dumped on the grid for free in the middle of the day. Though I think the guiding principle here is that climate action has to leverage energy abundance. And that's why if you want, for example, for solars to be able to contribute to a grid, solar energy needs to be backed up by a dispatchable source such as smaller natural gas plants. And so this has to be an all of the above approach where the market is allowed to transition seamlessly to cleaner forms of energy. If it's done in a top-down way, those policies are going to produce energy scarcity and at the end of the day, a political backlash against climate action.
Okay, Mario Loyola, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate having you on.